Saturday morning, time to kick off the Experts program. That means Luis Alvarez, CEO of the Alvarez Technology Group, is on the line with us. Good morning, Luis.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Happy Labor Day weekend.
It's going to be a beautiful weekend and lots of barbecuing and celebrating before the end of summer is officially declared.
Yeah, that's right. Kind of the unofficial end of summer, because the actual final day of summer, the season, is the 21st of September.
Yeah,
so, yes.
But everybody just kind of thinks this Labor Day is the final hurrah of the summer vacation or summertime, and then you just hunker down and get back to work.
That's right. When we were kids, it really was the final day of summer because school always started on Tuesday.
Yeah. Remember those days? Now kids go back to school in sometimes in the beginning of August.
I know. Wow. I was telling a kid one day, I said, that's the biggest ripoff in the world. When I was your age, and it was the day after Labor Day. And of course, you probably remember that everybody watched the Jerry Lewis Labor Day telethon.
Yep. I actually volunteered for that a few times because it raised money, and there was venues all over the country that would switch back and forth. They'd have local shows. So I worked the phones and did some other stuff running around, and it was a lot of fun. We had a real good time helping out back in the day. Been a while since the telethon.
I just remember as a kid, you're watching the show and Jerry Lewis says, "Hey, you kids can raise money for muscular dystrophy. Just get an empty coffee can and go around your neighborhood, knock on the door and ask people to give you money and tell them it's for the telethon, and then take it to your fire station and drop it off," because all the fire stations were official fund collection places as well. So
I got that. Yeah, you're right.
So I remember riding my bike around the neighborhood with a coffee can collecting money. And the funny thing was people gave you money because there were only 4 or 5 TV stations in those days and everybody was watching the telethon. So they were all hip to it. So they gave you the money and you took it down to the fire station. You turned it into the firefighters. You didn't think of keeping a dime for yourself or anything like that. And I was thinking to myself today, if some kid knocked on your door with a coffee can and wanted money for some...
Yeah, it's a different world now.
It certainly is. You look at him like, what? But yes, it is certainly a different world. But boy, those were good days, weren't they?
They were. It's a simpler time, my friend. It was a much simpler time.
And in those days, when we drove, we put both hands on the steering wheel as we drove down the street. Now, in our modern world, we have self-driving car makers who are urging regulators to whip the steering wheel out the window. They want these autonomous cars to not even have a steering wheel. What's going on here?
Well, a lot of things. Technology tends to get far ahead of legislation and regulation. And our poor people in Washington and Sacramento are left trying to scramble to figure out how to regulate things. And that's really one of the things that car makers who are now focused on developing autonomous vehicles have started to push back on these organizations or these legislatures and saying, hey, we want to build cars without foot pedals, without steering wheels, because our cars drive themselves. We don't need those things. Right now, it's mandated that even if a car is designed to be autonomous, it still has to have the ability to have a human drive it. And companies like Waymo and Cruise and even Tesla are saying, this is antiquated thinking, and we want the regulations to allow us to build essentially cars that are pods for people that drive themselves and that don't need any sort of human intervention other than unlocking the door and getting in.
And what they're saying, and this is kind of an interesting argument that they're making, is that the only way to make driverless cars safer is to take the human element out of the vehicle completely. Don't let people muck with it.
Yep. And if you look at the history of autonomous driving tests and the cars that are out there in the roadway today, and there have been a few accidents, but in almost every case, the accident was caused by the human driver doing something, not the car that was driving itself. Or, somebody ran into a human driver, ran into an autonomous car. But autonomous cars, people tend to forget that these things are being driven by computers who are not distracted by texting or by the kid crying in the back seat or by, the cat getting away and jumping on your lap while you're trying to turn left or turn right. So all of those distractions are not a factor, and its brain, for better or for worse, can calculate much faster than the human brain in terms of responding to events around it. And this self-driving vehicles are going to be much safer than human-driven vehicles. And it's a mistake to try to make them like human plus. This is, at the end of the day, people that are going to get into these kind of vehicles vehicles and purchase these kind of vehicles are looking for that experience. Hey, I got this car because I want it to drive itself. I don't want to drive it.
Right.
So why put a steering wheel in it?
So what does this do to laws that say you can't operate a motor vehicle while under the influence, whether it happens to be marijuana or alcohol? You could see a lot of those laws go out the door, right? Because what does it matter if you can't control the vehicle, why shouldn't you just sit there half crocked?
Yeah, well, it's a reason most of us use Uber, right, or Lyft, is so that we can go out and have a good time and crawl into the back seat and not have to worry about driving ourselves anywhere. So you're right. Once autonomous vehicles become prevalent and readily available, then laws like drinking while driving, those sorts of things will be a thing of the past.
Yeah.
I guess like riding a horse under the influence is, it's not something that we'll have to worry about anytime soon.
That's going to be really interesting. I think the other thing that's going to be really kind of crazy when you think about this is eventually what happens to traffic enforcement. You're not going to need traffic cops because if you can't do anything to the vehicle, it's going to drive at whatever the speed limit is, or it is going to drive at whatever the safe speed is if that's below the limit. And how would the police even stop a driverless car if you can't pull the thing over and stop it? That also begs the question, obviously, technologies are going to have to be developed. You're in your driverless car going down the street and an ambulance needs to pass you, or a fire truck, or a police officer because they have to get to an emergency on the other side of you. Mm-hmm. How is the car going to know to move over? Is there going to be some sort of manual intervention, or is there going to be something transmitted from the emergency vehicles that would force all of the vehicles over, in front of them over to the side of the road?
The answer to your question is twofold. First off, today, the autonomous vehicles that are out there, like the Tesla, it recognizes when there's flashing lights and a siren, and it responds accordingly. And, it will, in the case of the Tesla, will tell the human, hey, you need to take control of this vehicle again so that you can pull over. But eventually, what all these manufacturers, even traditional car manufacturers, are settling on is a standard for communications, intra-vehicle communications, so that you can have those sorts of things where a first responder can flip a switch and any autonomous car within range will respond and pull over or get out of the way, which is something to be said because a lot of drivers don't pull over, don't get out of the way. So I think the first responders will be happier because they won't have to worry about cars that are misbehaving because the humans are misbehaving.
Right. Well, I guess, in the one, even though it's just kind of a scary, brave new world that we're looking at here in the future, the one thing that could be a real benefit out of this would be the elimination of the need to ever go to the DMV again and deal with those people.
Yeah.
A lot of bureaucrats are going to be out of a job.
Yeah.
Well, would you even need a driver's license, right?
You wouldn't.
No.
Yeah.
So that no more driver's licenses. Your 10-year-old kid wants to go to the store, jumps into the self-driving car, and off he goes. Hey, wait a minute, Junior.
Yeah. Well, you're still going to have to exercise some parental controls.
Right.
And I suspect that there'll be the ability, just like you can do child-proofing some devices, even the places on your cable network or your internet where kids can't go to, you're going to be able to do the same thing with an autonomous car where you can just say, Junior can't take the car without my permission. And, technology will make it much easier to manage those type of things than it is today, where all you have to really do is steal your parents' keys and take off in the car.
Well, I'll tell you what, if they do get rid of the DMV, I'm all for them imploding the DMV offices. And I want to be the first guy that gets to push down on the plunger.
Maybe we'll just give you a sledgehammer.
There you go.
So you can feel that real physical.
Exactly. That'll be a happy day for millions of people. See, UPS has been discreetly using self-driving trucks to deliver cargo. Didn't know this was happening.
Yep.
Are they doing it around here? I haven't every UPS truck.
This in Arizona. There are vast stretches of highway that are pretty empty.
I've driven on those.
So it's a pretty safe place to test autonomous trucks. And that's where a lot of people think we're going to see a more rapid development of autonomous vehicles is in the trucking industry, especially the long-haul trucking industry. The routes are fairly well-defined. The vehicles tend to be driven much safer than, small cars. And you're seeing more and more work being done at that level, automating not just the trucks themselves, but even the entire logistics of loading a truck and unloading a truck.
Right.
So in essence, a lot of these people that are looking looking toward the future, see warehouses that are essentially very lightly manned, where autonomous trucks pull up, open the back of the truck, a load is put in there by, an autonomous loader of some sort, a forklift that's driving itself, and then that truck shuts the back door and takes off and heads to where its destination is, and then it's unloaded at the other end, all without human intervention. That's kind of the ultimate goal, and we're getting there. We're getting there pretty quickly because a lot of these technologies, a startup called Too Simple, for example, has been developing autonomous trucks, working with UPS to deliver cargo, between major distribution centers for a better part of a year. And they hope to, right now they're doing it with a safety driver on board, or there's something goes south, they have somebody on there. But the tests have been so successful that they're hoping that by the end of next year, by 2020, they'll be able to get rid of that human person and vehicle and have this thing truly autonomous driving itself. And for those people that worry about accidents involving these trucks, in reality is that there was, in 2017, there were almost 1,000 truckers who died on the road because of their own mistakes or,
right,
something that happened to them. So if you can reduce that number by eliminating the drivers and reduce all the things that some drivers tend to do. We've all been out there on the highway when you have a truck that is passing another truck and you're wondering, why is he doing that? He's not going to get very far ahead of the other truck. But when you have autonomous trucks, they won't care. They're going to be the safest vehicles on the road. And it's going to reduce the cost of delivery, which will then translate into, lowering consumer costs. So everybody wins.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see it all roll out. And I'm familiar with some of those roads in Arizona. I was on I-40 last year. And man, between Flagstaff and Albuquerque, there's not much on I-40. So I definitely see big trucks on that road.
I remember driving when I was in the Air Force. I drove from San Antonio to El Paso a few times and talked about another stretch of road with absolutely nothing on it. It's another good place for autonomous vehicles.
All right. Luis Alvarez, CEO of the Alvarez Technology Group, our guest today on Power Talk Radio. He'll join us again Monday morning around 8:40 a.m. And, of course, the website is alvareztg.com. At AlvarezTG is the Twitter handle. And, Luis, the toll-free number for the I-Team.
And give us a call at 866-78-I-Team. It's 866-784-8326.